Hello, everybody, all of our listeners, and welcome back to Real Talk. This is our episode 4, Real Talk with Jesse and Sherrard, and you can now find us on Spotify if you're not listening to us on Spotify. And if you are, you can also find us on our Facebook page, vialink.org.
Yes, we are finally on Spotify. Very excited.
Very excited. Again, you can find us on Spotify, Real Talk with Jesse and Sherrard. We are going to be talking about mental health and the holidays today. That is just always the topic that is coming up. I think, especially when you do work in the mental health field and behavioral health field, as Jesse and I do, that it's always, once it hits about October, people start talking about stress in the holidays. What do you think, Jesse?
I agree. I think as soon as right before Halloween and then after Halloween, it's like boom, boom, boom. It's just people are stressing, things are coming up. So yeah, I agree 100%.
So we are going to try and be organized in our discussion, which y'all know is not always our jam, but that's what we're doing today. And we are going to be going through an article of some of the 5 bigger myths about mental health in the holidays. I would like to congratulate this website that we are reading this article on. I don't really know anything about them, so I won't really plug the website, but they do have a pop up for this mental health article with a promo for 988 if you are feeling like you need to talk to someone, which is wonderful. And, we just really recommend for anybody who is posting content, in particular, content that could be emotionally activating, such as mental health in the holidays. Plugging that 988 is there during the holidays, especially 24 hours a day. It's free for just whatever you need to get out. Don't hesitate to call. Just call 988. We're there for you.
Yes, or text. If you can't call, you can always text 988, which is a bonus.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, we'll be going through these myths, and then this is some content from NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, where they have then also pivoted to what their research and knowledge shows might be the actuality of what's going on in the holidays. And then Jesse and I are just going to talk about what we know or what we think or what we've experienced.
All
So
right.
here we go. Myth number 1, and this is one that I actually address quite frequently, being that my clinical specialty is suicide. Myth number 1 being that suicide rates increase during the holiday season. So, the corrected fact, the actually, is that the highest rates of suicide occur in late spring after the holiday season, but the risk of suicide is just as serious during the holidays as it is year round. So, Jesse, what are your thoughts? Was that ever a myth that you had heard?
Yeah, so I actually thought that the suicide rate was higher during the holidays than they were during the spring, just because there's a lot of things that come up during the holiday season. So this one I learned a lot from, when I read the article because I was like, what? I could have swore that, that's what I would have assumed, just I would have thought they would have been a lot higher or that would have been the highest time, but it's a myth.
Yeah, it's actually something that's stated just kind of like as fact in a lot of news, even, but TV shows and things like that. This is something I started doing some research on because I had actually read about it being a myth in one of Thomas Joyner's books. Thomas Joyner is a suicidologist, and the book was about myths about suicide. So how fitting. That the death rates and attempt rates for suicide peak during the spring. His theory being kind of twofold, and one that for the majority of people who are attempting suicide, especially lethally attempting suicide, they don't want anybody else around them. They're not trying to, someone's not trying to traumatize somebody else. In fact, why we do
Yeah.
try and avoid that term committing suicide is it's this, intentional act against anybody. Um, that they don't want somebody to see them. So when the holidays are coming around, you're so surrounded by people that it does actually lower that kind of attempt rate. And then also part of his theory with some studies that were done being that when spring comes, because this article even does mention a little bit about seasonal affective disorder and that so many people can kind of get those winter blues.
Yeah.
And it's gray, it's rainy as it is right now at my house. And
Mhm.
people are bundled up. But then when spring comes and things kind of come back to life and people are outside, but then someone who may be really struggling with that isolation and feeling alone, it's now like their mental wellness doesn't match what's going on externally, not only with nature, but with people around them. And that actually increases or heightens some of those suicide risk factors. And I have my own, sorry, I'm talking a lot about this. I have my own personal thoughts on this as well. I was talking this over with a colleague the other day because we were talking about suicide rates, but remembering that that data of when an attempt happens or when a tragic death happens, that's not telling the journey of when the suicide thoughts started.
Right.
And I think that during the holidays, like you were saying, Jesse, that those thoughts can actually really increase and become more painful, but you're just not going to attempt then. But then when this attempt window comes after the holidays have passed, that ideation has really increased. But I think that what decreases is what we call the thwarted sense of belongingness, the isolation. As we know,
Yeah.
suicide ideation twists the logic of the brain. And part of what makes someone capable of a suicide attempt is that their thoughts of suicide that are false have them thinking that they're isolated and everybody's going to be better off without them.
Right.
So when a death occurs, someone is in that false mindset, not to their own fault, just those brain lies of thinking that sure, people will be sad, but this death isn't going to really affect them in the long run. But because of the holidays, someone can kind of break through that barrier in knowing, like, oh, well, if I ruin everybody's Christmas or Thanksgiving or whatever celebration it might be because I die, like, they will be affected by that. So I kind of
Yeah.
almost think the holiday pressure decreases suicide action, but might increase suicide ideation, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And I also noticed, like, when I was on the phone lines, like, because I did those for a couple of years, I do think that the phone calls pick up, during the holiday season. And not majority of them, aren't suicidal ideation. They're just lonely. So I do think, like, it is kind of, when you really sit back and think about it, you would think, okay, well, their calls increase, so there's got to be more risk, or there's going to be more suicide attempts during that time. But I think 9 times out of 10, when we get those calls during the holidays, it's more that people are just really lonely and they just want to talk to somebody, and it's not so much that they're saying, oh, I don't want to be here anymore. It's more of them just wanting to talk to somebody or feeling down, kind of like you said, like the winter blues. Like they just kind of need a listening ear. And then, because I always noticed that, like when I was on phone calls before, the person just wants to talk, and then like, okay, well, I'm gonna go decorate my Christmas tree, like I'm gonna go do this for my kid or something. So it's always I can kind of see it now, but like you said, I think a lot of the winter blues and stuff has a lot to do with, like, maybe the thoughts, or that feeling of being lonely. But I do kind of agree with you there. Like, when you have those thoughts and you might actually attempt, you probably do think, okay, if I do it and all my family's in town, then I ruined everybody's Christmas. Or I'm affecting my 4-year old who this is their fourth Christmas. Like, and I think that's kind of the mindset that you were saying that people might have. So I think I could see where it could be higher, at a different time versus the holidays.
Yeah, we're almost like that again, false perspective of feeling like perceived burdensomeness, as it's called, that people will be better off without you, which is never true.
Right.
That it's not just about you in that moment, it's about that holiday. And that's where
Yeah.
someone might be able to kind of combat that attempt in that moment. And it's, really sadly more about the holiday than knowing how much they matter.
Yeah.
And then the pressure. I mean, holidays come with pressure.
Yeah. And that might be something that actually saves people. Like, what if people, they're sitting there thinking how lonely they are, and then they kind of had them thoughts, but then they're like, well, my whole family's going to be here, and I can't disappoint them. It kind of might uplift them once they're around their family, and, they have those people around them that they might be what saves them when you really think about it.
Yeah. Or being sure that when it is the holidays that you are with the people that make you feel good,
Yeah,
whether that's your family of origin or your family that you found, being
yeah,
sure that you're eliminating, interpersonal stress where you can and not putting pressure on yourself that your holiday has to look like anybody else's.
right, yeah, agreed.
Well, let's see. I'll move us into myth number two. Myth number two is that everyone gets the holiday blues. It's not a big deal. Where NAMI would like to remind us actually that while the holiday blues are different from a diagnosed mental illness, short term mental health crises and issues should be taken very seriously, and they could even build up to a more long term mental health issue, which I would say is, clearly with our work with 988 and crisis lines is something
Right.
that we definitely agree with because when we are not learning how to manage our stress because stress is going to come, that buildup can keep putting you into that fight or flight mode, that crisis
Yeah,
state of brain functioning. And it's a real drain on your brain.
right. And especially like, I think a lot of people, stress out about, oh, especially people with kids or people without kids, it go either way, they want to make the holiday perfect. And, kind of like what you said, your last statement was like, just because your holiday doesn't look like someone else's. And I think there's a lot of pressure for that for people like, oh, like, they're getting like some people they'll tell their, like I have nephews that are in school and they send out a list and they're like, hey, let's not, talk so much about what you get for Christmas because some people don't get things. And, I think that's really important that whatever you do for your holiday, you know, um, it doesn't have to look like everybody else. As long as you're happy and the people around you are happy and you're all together, that's really all that matters. But I do think there's so much pressure and stress to kind of be like, oh, well, they're doing this for their family, or they're going out on vacation, or they got 50 Christmas presents on their tree versus I can only afford five. And I think that we put too much pressure on ourselves as well to, try to create that perfect holiday when in all reality, the perfect holiday is spending time with people that love you and that you love. And I think that's where the biggest blessing is because I saw a thing on Facebook the other day. It was like, it's not what's, under the tree, it's about who's around it. And I think that sometimes, we forget that because we're so worried about, oh, I got to get them the perfect gift or I got to make the perfect dinner or I got to make sure everybody's this, I got to get the perfect cute little outfit. And, I think sometimes we put too much into that instead of realizing, hey, let me take a step back. Let me take a deep breath. My family's going to be here, and families, whatever it looks like. It doesn't. It's not always blood. So I always try to remind myself because I do get stressed out. Because I'm like, oh, I got to get my cat something. I mean, as silly as it sounds, but I'm like, I got to do this. I got to do that. I got my nephews. I got my mom. I got my wife. I got friends. And even though you want to do so much, sometimes it's just not possible. So like just being there with them, I have to take a sec back and be like, okay, but I get to be with them. And that's all that matters. And that's what I kind of feel like has helped me kind of like deal with like being stressed out of trying to find the perfect gift or create the perfect holiday. Like I think there's a lot of pressure for that. So I think, sometimes you just got to take a step back and be like, but what is it really going to be?
Yeah.
It's family. It's your kids. And family could be you and your cat. I mean,
Yeah.
that's all that matters. Is that you're surrounded by love and that you feel loved. And it doesn't have to be the perfect. What everybody's getting on Amazon or what new games coming out for PlayStation or stuff like that. Like that's not at the end of the day for me. I don't think that's the biggest thing, but I do think we all struggle with that because we all want to create the perfect moment.
Yeah. And for some people, wellness during the holidays means skipping the holiday.
Yeah,
And there's no problem with that either. I mean, in our work, with facilitating our survivors of suicide loss support group, there are many loss survivors where that is the way that they are going to do their holiday is that I'm skipping it.
yeah,
I'm going camping, I'm going on a vacation, I'm staying in my house and watching movies, doing whatever is going to help you feel like you can breathe That's what and sometimes that breathing does mean feeling sadness, and that
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that. We are supposed to feel sadness at times.
Yeah.
It's how do you take care of yourself while you're feeling that sadness where our wellness and our power can come into play. And I
Yeah.
think that sometimes that like, even in kind of reading the way this was worded, where it's like people are almost resistant to wanting to use a mental health type of term, like feeling
Mhm.
depressed or feeling anxious. I think about that because even in it was like a reality show I was watching on Bravo where I live. But one of the characters on there, even they were talking about postpartum depression, but they were saying that I just keep calling it the baby blues because I think I'm afraid to use the words like depression or postpartum depression. And I think the same can be said around I mean, life in general, but the same around the holidays where, there's nothing that makes anybody weak or wrong or sick or ill because they are going through depression or anxiety
Right.
or suicide thoughts, like whatever you may be going through. Our brain is with us at all times,
Yeah.
and your brain is wonderful the way that it is. And there's nothing wrong with experiencing these symptoms, and it's
Mhm.
just where our power comes in. One, as a community, to be able to talk about it, that we don't have to lessen it to any degree so that we're making other people feel uncomfortable. And then just ourselves being able to really accept what that emotion is that we're having. And I don't have to change it in this moment. I don't have to make myself happy. In fact, that can be unhealthy. I'm sad right now for a reason. So, how do I take care of myself while I'm sad?
Yeah, and you know what? I'm really grateful that you said that because, like, me and my sister are really close, and we lost our grandpa almost 9 years ago. And we always did Christmases at his house, so it was a really big thing. And as when he passed away, of course, the first holiday was really kind of tough. But like me and her will talk, and she'll be like, "Well, I kind of feel dumb for still being sad." I'm like, "But you shouldn't. That's still a big part that is missing, and it's okay to be sad." And we went back and forth on it because there's been times where I've been like, well, maybe I should just try to think of the positive. But then I realized, like, I'm a human. Like, if you miss somebody, then it's okay to be sad in that moment and not think, oh, well, I'm crazy for this, or I feel like this, or I'm not depressed, I'm just a little down. Like, it's okay. If you have a sad moment and you need to go cry, or you need to be by yourself for a little while and then come back to the group, or you know figure out something to do the next day. I mean, that's okay too. And I think a lot of people feel a lot of pressure to be happy. Like, I hear a lot of people around the holidays say fake it till you make it. But I feel like, it's okay, whatever emotion you're going through. Like, even if you're lonely and you do have them suicide thoughts, and that's okay. Like, you're not crazy, or nothing's wrong with you because you have that. You're a human being. Like you said, your brain's with you at all times. Anything can trigger something in your mind about a situation, somebody, or you could be having a great time, and then you get a Christmas card that reminds you of someone that you lost, and you kind of feel sad for a second. Like, that's okay. And I think a lot of people think that they're not allowed to be sad, or they shouldn't be because it's holiday season, and all these great things are happening, but we just all have to remember, like, we're all human, like, we're all going to have different emotions, and that's okay too.
Yeah, and there is a lot of grief associated with the holidays,
Yeah.
and it's okay to be sad about that. You can be sad and joyful and celebrating, but acknowledging grief, all of that all at the same time. And
Right.
we had a similar journey to yours, Jesse, with my family. 2 Christmases ago was our first Christmas without my grandmama. She had passed away, and she was, the one that hosted and did all the Christmases and had, 1,000 Christmas decorations and all of
Yeah.
that. And of course, it was really hard on my mom going through her first Christmas without her mom. And, I was so proud of my mom because she was just really open and honest about it, where she's like, it's hard to do this without my mom. She's like, I love Christmas, but I don't have the same enthusiasm this year.
Yeah.
And I was really proud of her for just talking with me and our family about that, and then we pivoted some things. We changed some of the ways we do Christmas. We acknowledged the grief. I was really proud. My grandfather even like made kind of a little toast to her and allowed himself to cry as we were talking. And I was like, I'm really proud of my family right now for just really being honest with ourselves and being like, there's a loss here. And we're also
Right.
happy. It's Christmas and, my cute little baby cousins running around and all that stuff
Yeah.
too. But like, there's a sadness. And
Yeah.
I think it's really powerful for parents. I mean, I'm an adult, I act like a child sometimes, but powerful for parents who do have children to also even model that you don't have to be forced happy all the time to enjoy your holiday. I think
Right.
that's a pressure that a lot of parents have of, well, how can I deal with what I might be experiencing when I have to make this holiday perfect for my child? And
Yeah.
I think your child can have a perfect holiday and still a happy holiday while also having constructive conversations about what it might mean to be sad or worried or whatever during the holidays.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that, and um, I think it's just like you said, just the pressure of it. But I think that's awesome that your mom was able to really sit down and talk to you guys about it, because sometimes that's one of the hardest parts. Like after losing somebody, like really admitting that, like, oh, this is hard for me, or this still hurts. And I commend your mom, because I think that's really hard to do in general, to admit, that, hey, I'm just not kind of feeling it, but I'm glad you guys are here, kind
Mhm.
of thing. So I mean, I think that I think that's amazing. And my family, we had to kind of go through the same, because it was kind of like the opposite. My grandpa was the one that hosted and had all the, he liked to sit around and, like talked about his little Watergate salad that nobody liked but him, like, but, and, when you lose somebody like that, of course your holidays are different. Um, it's a different type of feeling, but it's still good to have the people that are still here. Like I'm still blessed. My grandma's still here, and um, I do have her. And then on my mom's side, I wasn't lucky enough to meet my grandpa on her side, but I still have my mom and my dad and my sisters and brothers, and now I got my cute little nephews running around. So it's always, even though sometimes you miss and you hurt on the holidays because the people you lost, it's still a beautiful thing to see your family together and still trying to make the holiday happy. And it's okay if I see some people get sad during the holidays and at our family events and stuff. And I'm like, that's okay. You
Yeah.
can be upset, because that's just life. And I think that we just have to normalize, that being sad is okay. Like you don't always have to, be feeling like you have to put on a fake smile. Just say, hey, I'm struggling today, and that's okay. And you'll have your, hopefully, you have a good support system to pick you up at the end of the day. But I think that's really cool that you said that, like how your mom just admitted, because I think that's important. I think it's hard enough, for people to really admit to, especially to family. That's a big thing. So I think that's really cool.
Oh, thank you. And I think just like you were saying that you can have both, you don't have to
Yeah.
decide I'm sad or angry or whatever on Christmas instead of happy, or it doesn't have to be Christmas. I apologize. We're not only acknowledging Christmas as a holiday.
Right.
Um, but that, in moments I'm sad and then now in moments I'm happy.
Yeah.
And you can have both, and that's great for you. Another kind of plug to my mom is that, she and I have talked a lot about kind of the power of the word and instead of or, and that makes so much more sense for our lives as humans is when we replace the word or with and, a lot of the times it can help us to make more sense. So I can be sad and happy today. I
Yeah.
don't have to be one or the other.
Right, yeah, and I like that, because sometimes you're both. Sometimes, like you said, you're both, and it's not really a I'm mad versus or I'm angry, or I'm sad or happy. Sometimes you're all of them. Sometimes you
Yeah.
just got like seven feelings, and that's okay.
Mhm. Let's see. We got already touched on this a little bit, so we have a great transition to myth number three. Myth number three being that adults are the only ones who get sad around the holidays, when actually children and teens are at high risk for some short-term mental health issues around the holidays as well. And in fact, that nationally admissions to child psychiatric hospitals are the highest in the winter.
Yeah,
Which is always sad to think about. Nobody wants to think about, especially
yeah,
young children struggling so much during the holidays. But one thing about it that I always found interesting, thinking back to when I did work on our helplines, is that so often, and we always see a spike, in calls and texts coming in from middle school, high school aged youth during the winter break. because a lot of the time their mental health support was provided through the school, not only
Mhm.
just socially with their friends and teachers, but that they would see the school counselor or whatever that is, and then they have this lapse of it for that 2-week period, and that can be quite isolating.
Yeah. Especially, like, sometimes, kids don't have the greatest support at home. So, like,
Mhm.
sometimes their friends and, like you said, a school counselor is really what keeps them going. And so when you have that long break, like you said, you kind of feel like you're isolated. And I worked at a foster facility for a couple years, and that they just it was one of the saddest times because like during their school break, they don't get to interact with like the other kids in different cottages because each cottage holds a certain amount of kids, and they didn't interact with them. So like their best friend might be in cottage A, and they're in cottage C, so they're not really seeing them. And then activities, they were trying to keep it to each cottage. So it was kind of isolating for them. And I noticed that a lot of the kids were sad, and a lot of them kind of just would distance themselves and would just stay in their room. And, that's when we had to try to, come up with something to, like boost their little happiness up in any way we can. Doing extra activities or, just talking to them. But I agree. I think that I could see where it is the highest in the winter, where kids are unfortunately admitted to, a hospital, because I do think that that's a tough time for kids and when they're alone.
Yeah, almost kinda like that breaking point happens.
Yeah,
And it is, as we stated before, a good opportunity for parents and caregivers, aunts, uncles, everybody to be able to kind of model that it's okay to have whatever feelings you're having during the holidays, and for all of us to remember that, you know, mental wellness, stress, all of these things, there's not like an age limit, so that
yeah,
younger people do really struggle, and we shouldn't dismiss what they might be struggling with because it doesn't make sense to us anymore. To remember that their world is different than our world. And no matter what, even if to you, what might be the activator of that feeling, like a fight with a friend or a class or whatever that might be, the feeling is still just as big, even bigger, because of
yeah.
the way that brains are developed. And we should be focusing on validating those emotions and how someone is trying to cope or how they are struggling, rather than in our adult brains trying to make sense of, well, why is this such a big deal?
Right. And then I think a lot of times kids see their parents stressing out. And sometimes I think kids are like, well, they're, because sometimes, parents are trying to come up with gifts and stuff, and they may be struggling, and kids pick up on that. And then
Yeah.
kids might blame themselves, or kids might be like they got to put more food out because I'm home, and and stuff like that. So I think that sometimes kids see what their parents are going through, and that affects them as well. And that's natural. I mean, when you care about your parents, you don't want to see them struggling. You don't want to see anything, getting them down. And I mean, that's for every season, but especially I feel like when you're looking at the holidays and stuff, and you see your family, upset, you kind of, as a kid, I mean, you probably feel bad, and you don't want to
Mhm.
see that. You want everybody to just be happy, and it's okay that everybody's not. But I think that's another thing for kids too. I think that kids pick up sometimes on their family or even outside, like when you go places and you see everybody's kind of like in a mood or stuff. I think kids pick up on that. I think their feelings are very valid, and like you said, they don't have that support system. They can't just go to their friends and be like, man, I feel like this today, because they're not in school. They might not, have cell phones. They might not be able to talk to their friends and stuff like that. So I think it's just really important to acknowledge like everybody goes through things no matter what age. And, just kind of be aware, of those feelings.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. Let's move on to myth number 4. This is an interesting one. Myth number 4 was that if you already struggle with mental health, then the holidays aren't really that different. I guess just meaning that like you don't feel extra or anything different mental health wise if you're already struggling just because the holidays are coming around. When the actually according to this article, is that the holidays can inflate a lot of stressors and activators in individuals who are already dealing with any form of mental health issue, and that pre existing mental health does not exempt you from feeling extra holiday blues. Oh, I think that's, it's almost something that is left out of the equation a lot of the times when we're thinking about, the holidays and mental wellness and emotions and feelings. Is we almost always kind of think of it as someone's been okay and then now the holidays are here and this blues comes on. But we forget sometimes that part of the equation of thinking like, trying to think of a good way to put this. There's a whole extra layer. So we
Yeah,
don't want to discount, people we know who do struggle throughout the year with whatever mental health issue it might be, that doesn't mean it won't feel worse around the holidays. And that they too, whomever it might be, has that permission to feel worse if they do. It's not something that you have to try and discount because, oh, I already deal with depression, so I know how to handle this. It could be a whole different world of stress that you're coping with when the holidays are
yeah.
coming around.
I definitely agree. And you know, it's I saw something on a mental health page on Facebook, and it said this might be what your holiday looked like, and it was like family, like sitting around, eating a dinner, and it said this is what mine looks like, and it was a like a teenage boy with his head down, up against the wall, and it kind of hit me. I was like, you don't think about it, like stuff like that sometimes, like people who are already struggling. Um, like you said, the holiday season can bring a whole type of different stress, and it can, like with anxiety. Think about people who suffer from anxiety. You could be excited that your family's coming, but the anxiety of having people over, cleaning the house, cooking dinner, making sure everything. I mean, that's a lot on somebody, on anybody. But if you suffer from anxiety, then I'm sure your anxiety is heightened because of that.
Mhm.
And then with depression, like you said, there's daily life functions where people, have to that are dealing with a mental illness that they deal with on a daily basis. But any new form like vacation can actually cause, mental health to be a little bit worse because it's a whole new thing that it's a whole new pressure. So like it's something different. And I feel like with the holidays, it's like you said, it's a whole different layer, and
Mhm.
so it could be completely different than what they were dealing with, 3 weeks before the holidays. Now they got what they were dealing with before and that extra layer. So I can definitely see where it could be, if not, if not worse for them sometimes.
And I think it was really great, Jesse, that you mentioned even specifically about anxiety, because I think even as this article is, it's talking so much more about the holiday blues and depression that might be occurring, which is very extremely valid, but we shouldn't discount that heightened levels of anxiety do occur as well. I know for myself, I am someone who lives with anxiety and have
Hmm.
gotten support for that ever since I was in college. And but the holidays, it gets heightened. The extra
Hmm.
energy in the air, you're busier, with work and with social life. There, you want to buy the right. I mean, all of that. My self care can kind of go down because we're so busy, and that makes my anxiety, spike.
Yeah.
And it's something that then you're like, well, am I allowed to talk about this around the holidays? That I'm feeling anxious, but it's about nothing because it's my
Yeah.
general anxiety, but it's just getting heightened right now because of just the way that it is this time of year. And I think normalizing not only, sadness, depression, grief that might go on during the holidays, but, extra levels of stress, worry, anxiety is so important too.
Yeah, and I'm kinda like you. I've been dealing with anxiety since I was, like, 13. I've always been a worry person. I don't know, ever since I was a teenager. But I know, like, for the holidays, it is very high. Like, even though, like, I live in an apartment, so we don't really do the Christmas at my house, but going to somebody like my brothers or my mom's or, my mother-in-law's, and I know they're stressing out, and then I get stressed out for them because, I'm just that type of person. So I'm like, I just feel, I'm kinda like my mood is just kinda like it's almost like you're so excited, but then it's just like you're having anxiety. Because I always feel so exhausted. Like after like everything's done, all the presents are unwrapped, and everybody's just kind of hanging out. I feel like I went through like 10 different lifetimes, and I'm just like, I just want to sleep because my anxiety is so high sometimes. And I have some good coping skills and a good support system, that I'm lucky and blessed with. But yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, it's just because you just have all those things, and your brain is going like 1,000 miles an hour because there's so much that goes into certain things. So I think that, anxiety, definitely for people with anxiety, I think it is a huge increase to them, and like you said, that's important for people to be aware of as well.
Um, so with that, here is the fifth and final myth that we'll be discussing today, where myth number 5 is if I just ignore this, it will go away. And the actually is that leaving short term mental health untreated can quickly turn into longer term issues. So, maybe even doing this is still in the article doing things like consuming alcohol or financially straining for gifts during the holidays. It might seem like the norm, but it can severely inflate mental health issues even in the long term post the holidays.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. I feel like you shouldn't ever ignore, or I mean, ignoring the signs, it doesn't go away. I think if, just trying to ignore it just kind of makes it worse, to be honest with you, because if you're not talking about it and you're just kind of dealing with it, you might feel like you're going to explode. You might, have a breakdown. Um, and like I said, consuming alcohol, people, they turn to certain things that they think will make the situation better, and like financially straining for gifts. I've done that a few times myself where I just was like, well, I'll just put this off, and because I wanted to make everybody happy, and I'm like, well, I'll just throw it on this card, or I'll just do this. And by the end of it, it's almost like you took yourself way down, when all reality, you didn't have to do that. But I think, like, again, like with the beginning of our conversation, where people just feel like they got to create that perfect moment, so I think that that's where the pressure lies. And sometimes we have to realize, you know it would be nice 100% to do everything we want to do for people and give as much as we can, but sometimes just being there, is enough.
Yeah. I think that pressure to have that perfect moment is so true. They literally, I keep bringing it back to Bravo shows, but what can we not learn from them? But I was watching Real Housewives, as is one of my self care tools, and they were talking about, they were making an analogy of like a stressful time being like that moment when you take your holiday photo with your family for, the Christmas card, and they're like, you have this perfect smiley family. Everybody who does this knows this is actually the most stressful day of the year
Yeah.
trying to get everybody just to get this photo, and that it shouldn't be ignored, what anybody is going through around the holidays, and that they don't I mean, we all know when you've had the kind of like thrown together holiday or when you chose to ignore it because that was your self-care, like sometimes those end up being the best things.
Yeah.
And I think in particular, kind of having your own way to be introspective and realize that something that maybe even is a just fine thing for you normally, if it is going, more on towards the spectrum of being not healthy for your brain and your body right now with extra stress
Right.
or blues or whatever it might be. Like thinking about alcohol, where I mean, heck, I live in Southern Louisiana. The majority of us, we drink and we celebrate, and that's what's going on. And it's fun and great, but that if you are feeling extra strains on your mental health and wellness during the holidays, to acknowledge if then like maybe drinking is not the best thing for you right now, because while
Right.
even if throughout the rest of the year it's a just fine thing for you, if right now you're seeing this isn't really celebratory, this is me trying to cope, or this is me trying to make it through something, or noticing that maybe you're drinking extra and it's not coming from a place of fun or celebration, that's something that's okay to acknowledge,
Yeah.
and and pivot, adjust for yourself.
Yeah. I definitely agree.
The holidays, it's like everything we've talked about, it's like this is something that can be fun, or it can go into that this is now affecting my mental wellness, but isn't that life really? It's just this extra pressure with the holidays to be glittery, and I love glitter, but I think that So often when anybody talks about the holidays, they're never talking about that perfect Christmas card or, perfect time we sang a carol together. It's, the funny stories of the time that,
Yeah.
the tree fell over on my mom, which is a true story. Or, like we burned the turkey, which is another true story. And, all those types of things, like the messiness can make it fun. Or when you just have true moments of connection with your people, your friends, your family, your tribe, of being able to say, like, I'm really not okay right now. And that
Yeah.
actually brings so much love and warmth into the season.
Yeah. I agree.
Well, I think this has been a very enlightening discussion.
Yes.
To pat ourselves on the back. I had something I was going to say. It's left me now.
He'll come back as soon as we stop recording. You're like, man.
There we go. Well, it must not have been that important, but we will be back on the 31st, New Year's Eve, to be talking about our own wellness goals for the new year. Again, please reach out to us if you have any questions, if you have any comments you'd like us to review, if you have any ideas for episodes, we love to hear from you. You can email us at realtalk, all one word, REALTALK, at vialink.org. And again, find us on Facebook at vialink211 and listen to us on Spotify at Real Talk with Jesse and Sherrod. And Jesse, I hope you have wonderful holidays.
You too.
And we are just sending all of our love out to everybody. Please remember to reach out to 988 if you ever need to talk. They're 24 hours a day and it is free. And we just want to remind everybody that you matter.
You do.
Thank y'all for being with us today.
Thank you.